Hi everyone, this is Nikki. I'm so excited to have you here today. Today we're going to look at the bold backgrounds die cut, but what we're going to do is look at 4 different ways to create these gold effects on the background. And we're going to compare and contrast those ways and go over what's the shiniest, what has the most dimension, what looks the best in pictures. We're just going to look at some different ways to use supplies you probably have and really get those out of the drawer and think about using them on your die cuts. The first technique is going to be with this nice bold background, and we're only worried about the vines here because we're going to cover everything else up with the little pumpkins and leaves, and we're going to use this paint pen. It's a gold paint pen. I have never tried this on die cuts before, but I use it all the time on wax seals. So I have this paint pen in my stash, and I just never seem to use it on anything else. So I thought my number one way to try this out and see how the gold accents look would be to try with a paint pen. Yes, it requires some coloring on those little lines, but with a paint pen, it covers, pretty much you just have to touch the line and you're pretty much dropping paint in on it. I'm going to try to scoot this a little bit closer so you can see, but I'm basically going to try to trace all of these vines and show you about how long it takes and what I think about the color. So let's face it, there are different gold colors. Some golds are darker and almost look brown for a camera. There are some that are light and airy. They just have different colors. And so based on what you want your results to be, I'm going to tell you in the camera versus in person as to what I think I like. And with this, could you just color the whole thing? Yes, we're going to put leaves and pumpkins over the top of these areas that are white, the big white leaf area. So I'm going to be putting pumpkins and leaves because there's separate die cuts that go with this. So if you wanted to try to just color the whole thing, you could, but these little areas of vines are pretty small, and I have a feeling if I just took this paint pen and went crazy with it, I'd still end up missing some of those little vines. I would probably spend too much time trying to color my leaves and my pumpkins and not actually get my vines colored. So I just did it individually. I am using a different mat than usual because this is a paint pen. I'm actually using a silicone mat, and paint pen, even though it's permanent, it kind of chips off of silicone. So you can easily get it off and you don't have to worry about ruining whatever mat you have underneath it. This would also, I'm sure, work with a glass mat, but I do not have a glass mat. I'm sure you could easily chip it off of that and get it cleaned up pretty easily, but silicone works as well. Okay, let's look at this. So it's got nice light reflection. It's a little bit more of a darker gold, I feel like, but it covers really well. It's thick, it's paint. You don't have to go back over it once you've touched the line. I think it took about 5 minutes. Okay, let's look at our second way to do this. I am going to emboss this. Okay, so I'm not going to do those individual lines. This is going to be our fastest way. It's going to look like a mess, but remember, we are putting things over these pumpkins and leaves. So I'm just trying to make sure I get enough ink down to cover all those little bitty areas. And this is the fastest way to get gold accents on your project. So just take an embossing pad, tap it all around, making sure that you get all of your vines covered, and then we're going to add a beautiful gold that is going to be very shiny. So now I'm going to pour polished gold over this. This is an embossing powder, so I'm going to pour it over the entire design. Yes, we'll have it in places that we don't necessarily need it, but embossing powder, if you haven't used it very often, people are always worried that they're using too much or they're going to run out of that. But this same gold that I've had, I use this all the time, and it really, a lot of it, even though you're pouring out a lot of your jar, most of it is still not sticking to the project. So just collect it in something and put it back in your jar. Okay, here it is. Look at that. It is shiny. It's a great gold color. I definitely really like this. And really, you could possibly cut those leaves out since we were going to cover them up with green. You could probably cut those out, or you could do the entire panel and just keep that as your panel, not using any other die cuts. So very nice color, the fastest one that we're going to try. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Now, I'll put this at our one of our longer ways. This is using metallic watercolor, and I'm starting with a wet brush. I'm not using watercolor paper. I'm using regular cardstock, and I'm adding just some watered down gold metallic paint. Then I go back in, dip my brush, and make this a little bit darker. So watercolor, kind of like markers, works in coats, and so you can do that first coat, and then you just barely have to touch with your brush for the second little bit. Let me zoom in and kind of show you that process. Okay, on this section, I've got a wet brush. It does have gold paint on it, but I'm just being a little bit more sloppy with it, and I'm making sure that I get some of these areas wet, and as it starts to lose its gold color, that's okay, just adding some water. Then I'm going to dip my brush into the gold paint that's more concentrated and fill in these areas. So I'm dipping it in gold, and it gets like a little, since I don't add any water to my paintbrush, it gets a little area of like very intense gold pigment on the end. And then I can follow those wet areas and add more gold to them. So you can do it as a one-time coat and you'll have a little bit of white showing through. That's why I go in and add that extra gold pigment, because I do not want to see any white on these vines. So this is probably our second most time consuming of the options that we do. It gives the most beautiful look up close. It's amazing. But as far as photographs go, sometimes in photographs, it just doesn't look quite as spectacular. So when I do it, I tend to do it if I'm making a card special for somebody versus if I'm creating content to show off. I tend to not do this because it doesn't photo quite as well. Okay, let's look at it up close. It is really the truest color of gold, I feel like. It's a little more yellowy gold, and it is just beautiful. So let's look at the difference in these side by side, and then we're going to do the final one that we'll use for our final card. So on the left is the gold embossing. Next, you have the gold paint pen. And last, you have the watercolor. Do you see what I mean about the color of that gold metallic watercolor? It's definitely a more yellow gold, but all of them look beautiful. For our last option and the one that we use in the card today, I did start out with colored cardstock. I thought about leaving those vines this nice Uncharted Mariner color, but when I got the idea to do the gold, I started with Nuvo drops, mainly because I don't use them very often. And what I discovered is, of course, it is time consuming. I think it's going to be our most time consuming of the options because you do have to kind of follow and color with this. The nice thing about Nuvo drops is that you can put them down and they're self-leveling, which means when you put it down on the paper, it doesn't matter if you get a little bit too much of a blob in one place. The ink and the paste or medium or whatever you want to call it is going to level itself out, which is nice, but it does give a nice dimension. So this way definitely puffs up that gold, and it makes, when you look at the card, you've got those raised vines. This may look a little strange since I've already got the piece to, instead of cutting it out of the white like I did before, it's on the blue and it's already mounted to that A2 size. So it looks strange, but it really is very cool. Let me show you once I put the pumpkins on how cool this looks. Here's another view of that finished product. I love how much it sticks up off there. Now let me do a quick little montage of putting this together so you can see how cute it looks. Now, I will put all of the products that we used today in the description so that you will be able to find them, even the colors for the pumpkins and leaves, which I know we didn't do on screen. Here is that final product with the Nuvo drops. So tell me in the comments below, which of these ways do you think you want to try? Which one is your favorite? We did watercolor, we did heat embossing, we did a paint pen, and we used Nuvo drops. So just tell me which of those was your favorite. And then, of course, if you're going to be using any of these supplies, make sure you click on my links in the description. I had such a good time with you. If you haven't done it yet, hit like and make sure you subscribe to the channel. Have a great day. Bye.